A tired caregiver scoops a tiny, bleeding pup from a rainy ditch and discovers a cruel secret hidden in a handmade collar, one that points to a rich man who runs the town and the officials who protect him. With the help of a burned-out game warden and a fearless radio host, she chases a trail of lies, threats, and a midnight transfer that shouldn't exist. Things get violent. People who should help turn away. And the smallest life she saved becomes the spark that could destroy everything. Who will pay the price to tell the truth? And how far will they go to stop it? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The windshield wipers squeaked against the glass as Eloise Carter gathered her belongings at Mrs. Hargrove's bungalow. Rain had been falling steadily since noon, turning the autumn evening gloomy and cold. The persistent patter against the roof created a melancholy soundtrack as she completed her caregiver duties. She'd just finished helping the elderly woman into bed after their usual evening routine of medication, dinner, and a bit of television. Tonight it had been an old episode of Wheel of Fortune that had made Mrs. Hargrove doze off halfway through. "Good night, Mrs. H," Eloise called softly from the doorway, lingering a moment to make sure the night light was working properly. A faint snore was her only answer, making her smile as she locked up and headed to her car. The metal keyring felt cold against her fingers as she double-checked all 3 locks, a habit she'd developed after Mrs. Hargrove had once left her front door wide open in a moment of confusion. The headlights cut through the misty darkness as Eloise drove home, her mind already on the hot cup of chamomile tea waiting for her and the worn paperback novel on her nightstand. Raindrops streaked across her windshield in chaotic patterns, hypnotic in their constant motion. She was about halfway there, passing the old Morgan farm with its sagging barn, when something small and dark darted across her high beams. Eloise's foot instinctively hit the brake, the car fishtailing slightly on the wet asphalt. Her heart jumped when she glimpsed movement in the roadside ditch, a flash of something pale against the mud. Pulling onto the shoulder, she grabbed her flashlight from the glove compartment, the metal cool and reassuring in her palm. The rain immediately soaked through her sweater as she stepped outside, her shoes sinking slightly into the soft ground. The beam revealed a tiny puppy, no bigger than her hand, trembling in the mud. Its cream-colored fur was matted with blood and dirt, and one of its ears was folded awkwardly against its head. "Oh, you poor baby," Eloise whispered, her old vet tech instincts kicking in immediately, pushing aside any thought of her own discomfort in the rain. She shrugged off her raincoat and carefully wrapped it around the shivering creature, noting how its ribs protruded beneath her gentle touch. The puppy didn't resist, too weak to fight as she lifted it gently. Its body felt frighteningly light in her hands, barely weighing anything at all. Back in her car, Eloise examined the pup under the dome light, water dripping from her hair onto the upholstery. It was male, maybe 6 weeks old, with a nasty gash along his ribcage that still oozed blood. His eyes were barely open, cloudy with fear and pain. She grabbed her emergency first aid kit from under the seat, using gauze pads and medical tape to fashion a temporary bandage, her fingers moving with the practiced efficiency of someone who had dressed countless animal wounds before. "Let's get you some help, little one," she murmured, stroking his head with one finger. "You're going to be okay." Eloise pulled out her phone and dialed the county animal shelter's emergency line, watching as the puppy's tiny chest rose and fell with labored breaths. After 6 rings, each one stretching her nerves further, a bored-sounding voice answered. "County Animal Services." The woman's flat tone suggested she was counting the minutes until her shift ended. "Hi, I've found an injured puppy that needs immediate medical attention. He's got a deep laceration and appears to be in shock." Eloise spoke rapidly, her professional assessment flowing automatically. "We're closed," the woman cut in, not bothering to hide her impatience. "Bring it during regular hours tomorrow between 9 and 5. "But he's bleeding, and it's freezing out. He might not make it until morning," Eloise protested, cradling the phone between her ear and shoulder as she adjusted the puppy's bandage. "Ma'am, we don't have staff for after-hours intake. Tomorrow morning." The line went dead with an abrupt click. Eloise stared at her phone in disbelief, then looked at the puppy curled against her chest, his tiny pink nose pressed against her skin. His tiny body shuddered with each breath, a tremor running through him that she could feel against her palm. The thought of him suffering through the night was unbearable, stirring a familiar anger she'd felt too often in her veterinary career. The frustration of systems failing the vulnerable. "Well, they'll just have to deal with us showing up anyway," she muttered, starting the car with renewed determination. The dashboard clock read 9:42 p.m. The shelter was 20 minutes away in good weather. Tonight it would take longer, but she'd make the drive if it meant saving this little life. The rain grew heavier as she drove, drumming against the roof like impatient fingers. The windshield wipers struggled to keep pace, creating momentary arcs of clarity before the glass blurred again. Eloise pressed on carefully, mindful of the precious cargo beside her. The puppy had stopped shivering quite so violently, snuggled in the makeshift nest she'd created from her raincoat. Occasionally, he would make a soft whimpering sound that twisted something in her chest. When she finally pulled into the shelter's empty parking lot, the building was dark except for a single security light casting yellow pools on the wet pavement. No vehicles were visible, except for a mud-splattered pickup truck parked near the back entrance. Eloise parked near the side entrance, where she knew the medical intake area was located from her previous volunteer work. Tucking the puppy securely in a clean towel from her kit, she hurried through the rain to the gate, her shoes squelching with each step. "Hello?" she called, rapping her knuckles against the metal, the sound echoing in the empty lot. "Please, I need help." The puppy whimpered softly, and she held him closer, trying to shield his small body from the rain with her hunched shoulders. Water dripped from her hair into her eyes as she peered through the chain-link fence. After several minutes of knocking, a flashlight beam hit her face with sudden intensity, making her squint and turn away. A figure in a rain slicker appeared on the other side of the gate, features obscured by a hood pulled low. "We're closed," the man stated flatly, his voice carrying the same disinterested tone she'd heard on the phone. "Come back tomorrow." "This puppy needs medical attention now," Eloise insisted, stepping closer to the fence. She partially unwrapped the towel to reveal the trembling animal. "He's injured and hypothermic. I've bandaged him, but he needs antibiotics and proper wound treatment." "Lady, I already told you on the phone. We're not staffed for after-hours cases. You'll have to wait." The beam wavered as he shifted his weight impatiently. "You're the one I spoke to? But you're here, obviously working. Please, just look at him. He's in pain." Eloise held the puppy higher, desperation edging her voice. "I was a vet tech for 15 years. I know when an animal needs immediate care. Leave now, or I'm calling the police for trespassing." The flashlight beam disappeared abruptly, and footsteps splashed away through puddles, leaving her standing alone in the rain once more. Eloise stood motionless, anger and disappointment warring in her chest. Her clothes were soaked through now, and the chill was seeping into her bones. The puppy stirred against her, his tiny pink tongue darting out to lick her hand, a gesture of trust that made her throat tighten. In that moment, her decision was made with absolute clarity. "Looks like you're coming home with me, little friend," she said softly, turning back toward her car, her steps more purposeful now. "Don't worry. I used to be a vet tech. We'll get you fixed up ourselves, I've still got supplies at home." As she drove away from the darkened shelter, the wipers beating a steady rhythm against the windshield, the puppy settled into a peaceful sleep, finally warm and safe in his towel nest. His breathing seemed less labored now, as if he somehow knew he was in caring hands. Eloise's mind was already running through the supplies she'd need from her old medical kit at home, antibiotics from her own recent dental procedure, clean syringes, wound cleanser, proper bandages. She might have left veterinary work behind years ago after that awful incident at Dr. Mercer's practice, but she hadn't forgotten how to care for creatures in need. Some skills, like compassion, never really leave you. Early morning sunlight streamed through Eloise's kitchen window as she carefully unwrapped the puppy's bandages. She'd stayed up half the night monitoring him, refreshing his water bowl and keeping him warm. The kitchen still bore evidence of her vigilance. A pile of used towels by the sink, an old blanket folded on the counter, and several cups of half-finished coffee scattered about. Now, in the clear light of day, she could better assess his condition, the soft golden rays illuminating details that had been obscured in the dimness of night. "Let's see what we're dealing with, little guy," she murmured, gently running her hands over his tiny body. Her fingers moved with the practiced precision of someone who had done this countless times before. The gash along his side wasn't as deep as she'd feared, but he was severely dehydrated. His ribs showed through his matted fur like the keys of a xylophone, and his gums were pale, almost bluish in the morning light. When she touched his nose, it felt dry and warm. As she checked him over, something caught her eye. A thin leather collar, almost hidden in the fur around his neck. The matted hair had concealed it during her initial examination. It was handmade, barely wider than a shoelace, with a small metal tag that glinted in the sunlight. Eloise squinted at the intricate design pressed into the leather. A circular crest showing a leaping deer surrounded by pine trees. The craftsmanship was exceptional, the details so fine they seemed impossible on something so small. She snapped a photo with her phone, the camera clicking softly in the quiet kitchen, then called a number she hadn't dialed in years. Her fingers hesitated momentarily over the screen, memories flooding back of why she'd stopped calling in the first place. "County Emergency Vet Clinic. This is Bethany." "Beth? It's Eloise Carter." Her voice caught slightly, the weight of their shared past hanging between them. "Eloise, it's been forever. How are you?" The familiar warmth in Bethany's voice instantly bridged the years of silence. "I need your expertise. I found an injured puppy last night, and there's something odd about his collar. Could you take a look at a photo?" Eloise kept her tone professional, though her mind was racing with questions. "Of course. Text it over. I'll check it right away," Bethany replied, without hesitation. Eloise sent the picture while cradling the phone against her shoulder. The puppy had curled up in a patch of sunshine that stretched across her worn linoleum floor, his breathing steady but shallow. His tiny chest rose and fell in an uneven rhythm that worried her. "Oh, wow," Bethany said after a moment, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "That looks like the Whitmore crest. You know, from that fancy hunting lodge up in the hills? My brother did some maintenance work there last summer. Said the place was like something out of a magazine. They're really particular about their branding. Everything from their stationery to their staff uniforms has that symbol." Eloise frowned, her forehead creasing deeply. What would a Whitmore puppy be doing in a ditch 5 miles from town, and in this condition? Her fingers lightly traced the puppy's protruding spine. "Good question. The Whitmores aren't exactly the type to neglect their animals. Quite the opposite. They're known for their prize-winning hunting dogs." Bethany paused, and Eloise could hear papers shuffling in the background. "Listen, I'm working till 4, but I can meet you after my shift if you want to bring him in. He should really get checked out properly. I have access to the ultrasound equipment after hours. Thanks, Beth. First, I'm going to stop by animal control. Something feels off about this whole situation. Eloise's instincts were humming, the same feeling she got whenever something at one of her care homes wasn't right. The county animal control office was housed in a squat concrete building downtown, its gray walls stained with years of neglect. The small parking lot was nearly empty, with only 3 vehicles occupying the dozen spaces. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects as Eloise approached the front desk, the puppy carrier held firmly in her hand. A bored-looking officer with thinning hair and food stains on his uniform glanced up from his computer. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting he hoped the answer would be no. "Yes. I found an injured puppy last night. I tried bringing him to the shelter, but they wouldn't take him." Eloise kept her voice steady, though she felt a flash of irritation remembering the rejection. The officer's expression didn't change. His eyes flicked to the carrier, then back to his screen. After-hours intake isn't available except for dangerous animal situations. It's policy. The last word came out as if it absolved him of any responsibility. "I understand that now, but I'm concerned about where he came from. He's wearing a Whitmore Lodge collar." She tilted the carrier slightly so he could see the puppy inside. "Probably just a stray that got loose." The officer started typing again, his fingers pecking at the keyboard, clearly dismissing her concern. The sound of his typing filled the otherwise silent room. "In that condition? And that far from the lodge?" Eloise pressed, leaning forward slightly. He was deliberately abandoned, possibly dumped from a vehicle. "Ma'am, we get dozens of strays every week, some in worse shape than that one. If you want to surrender the animal, you can fill out these forms." He pushed an Avhom clipboard toward her, smudged with fingerprints from countless previous visitors. Eloise didn't take it. Instead, her attention was caught by a stack of papers on the desk labeled Shelter Transfers Approved Facilities. She couldn't make out the details, but something about the official letterhead looked familiar, triggering her memory of the papers she'd glimpsed at the shelter the night before. "Actually, I'll keep him for now," she said, casually pulling out her phone. While pretending to check a message, her thumb working rapidly across the screen, she quickly snapped several photos of the transfer paperwork. The flash was off, but the artificial click sound seemed deafening in the quiet office. The officer frowned, his eyebrows drawing together like storm clouds. "No photos allowed in the office, ma'am. Security protocol." His hand moved slightly, as if considering reaching for her phone. "Oh, sorry. Just checking something from work. One of my elderly clients needs medication." Eloise tucked her phone away, keeping her expression neutral despite the racing of her heart. "Thank you for your help." Outside in the parking lot, the sun now high overhead, she sat in her car and examined the photos she'd taken. The air conditioning struggled against the midday heat as she zoomed in on the images. The letterhead matched the one she'd seen at the shelter last night. But there was something else. A small logo in the corner that looked suspiciously like the crest on the puppy's collar. It wasn't identical, but the similarities were undeniable. The same leaping deer, the same arrangement of trees. Her phone buzzed with a text from Bethany. "Meeting wrapped early. Come by at 3:30 if you can. Loading dock entrance. Bringing some supplies from home." Eloise started her car, the engine groaning to life, glancing at the puppy dozing fitfully in his carrier on the passenger seat. His tiny paws twitched, as if he were running in his dreams. "Don't worry, little one. We're going to figure out exactly where you came from." She reached over to adjust the blanket around him. "And why someone wanted to make sure you didn't make it through the night." The loading dock door creaked open with a rusty groan as Bethany ushered Eloise and the carrier inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder before pulling it shut. The back hallway of the vet clinic smelled of antiseptic and pet shampoo, with undertones of kibble and the faint muskiness of anxious animals that had passed through earlier in the day. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the worn linoleum floor. "Exam room 3, Bethany whispered, her eyes darting towards the front of the clinic as she led them past storage shelves stacked with medical supplies. Her blue scrubs rustled like fallen leaves as she closed the door with a soft click. "Let's see our little patient. I've got everything ready." Eloise carefully lifted the puppy from his makeshift nest of towels onto the cold, steel exam table. The metal surface reflected the overhead light, making the puppy squint. He whimpered softly, a sound that tugged at her heart, but stayed remarkably still as Bethany began her examination, her practiced hands moving with gentle efficiency over his small, trembling body. "Poor baby," Bethany murmured, her fingers checking his pale gums and cloudy eyes. Her forehead creased with concern as she assessed his condition. "He's dehydrated, possibly malnourished. I'm going to draw some blood, okay? We need to know exactly what we're dealing with here. Could be parasites, could be something worse." While Bethany worked, retrieving a tiny needle and collection vials from a nearby drawer, Eloise pulled out her phone and showed her clearer photos of the collar she'd taken in better light. The tooled leather looked expensive, the crest distinct against the rich brown surface. "You mentioned your brother worked at Whitmore's for that summer. Did he ever mention anything about their breeding program? Any details at all?" Bethany secured a small vial of the puppy's blood before answering, her movements deliberate as she labeled it. She glanced toward the door, then lowered her voice to barely above a whisper. "Not exactly, but—" She swallowed visibly. "I've treated some of their hunting dogs when they needed emergency care, after hours. Every single one had collars exactly like this, hand-tooled leather, same distinctive crest, very high-end stuff." The blood analyzer hummed in the corner while they waited, its mechanical drone filling the tense silence. Bethany kept checking the puppy's vitals, her movements gentle but precise, occasionally murmuring reassurances when he flinched. She applied a soothing ointment to his injured paw, wrapping it in a tiny bandage. When the machine finally beeped its completion, she crossed the room and studied the readout, her expression shifting from professional concern to something darker. "This is strange," she said, tapping a finger against the printout. "There are significant traces of ace-promazine in his system. No wonder he's so lethargic." "What's that exactly?" Eloise asked, moving closer to see the results for herself. "A sedative. Pretty strong one, especially for a puppy this size. It's a controlled substance. You can't get it without a proper veterinary license, and most regular vets don't even stock it anymore because of the regulatory paperwork." Bethany frowned, her brow furrowing deeper. "It's mainly used in private practices now, especially for large animal work, horses, farm animals, that sort of thing." "Like at a hunting lodge?" Eloise asked, the pieces starting to form a disturbing pattern in her mind. Before Bethany could answer, they both froze at the sound of tires on gravel outside. Eloise moved quickly to the window, carefully parting the vinyl blinds with her fingers. She felt her heart jump into her throat. A white county animal control van with official markings was pulling into the parking lot, its headlights sweeping across the building. "Beth, I can't let them take him," she whispered urgently, stepping back from the window. "Not until we know what's really going on. Something feels very wrong about all this." Bethany nodded, already moving with purpose, gathering supplies. "He needs IV fluids anyway. I'll admit him overnight for treatment and monitoring. I can list him under our charity care program." She quickly gathered the puppy and his paperwork, her expression resolute. "Go out through the staff entrance by the break room. I'll call you later with updates. Don't worry. I'll make sure he's safe." Eloise slipped out the back door, heart hammering in her chest, just as voices echoed in the front lobby. Deep, official-sounding tones asking questions. She made it to her car without being seen, sliding into the driver's seat and ducking down. Her hands were shaking slightly as she started the engine, adrenaline making her movements jerky and uncoordinated. That evening, as darkness settled over her small kitchen, she was absently stirring a pot of leftover vegetable soup when her phone rang. The harsh electronic sound made her jump. The caller ID showed an unlisted number, and Eloise hesitated before answering, her thumb hovering over the screen. "Miss Carter?" The voice was male, professionally cordial, but with an unmistakable edge of authority. "This is Director Matthews from County Animal Services. I understand you've been making some rather persistent inquiries about a stray puppy you claim to have found." Eloise's soup suddenly lost its appeal, a knot forming in her stomach. She turned off the burner and leaned against the counter. "Yes, I found him injured last night. I was concerned about his welfare." "And you've been asking quite a lot of questions at our office, taking photographs of official documents without permission, disturbing our staff during their duties." "I was concerned about—" "Ms. Carter," he cut her off, his voice dropping to a colder register. "Let me be perfectly clear. The Whitmore family has been a pillar of this community for generations. Their contributions have supported countless civic improvements. They support our shelter generously every year. If you're implying any connection between them and your stray, you're making extremely serious accusations without a shred of evidence." The threat in his tone was unmistakable, hanging in the air between them. Eloise's grip tightened on her phone until her knuckles whitened. "I'm simply trying to help an injured animal," she said carefully, measuring each word. "That's my only concern here." "Then I strongly suggest you stop stirring things up and causing trouble. Focus on your own business. The shelter handles strays according to established protocol." There was a weighted pause. "I trust we understand each other? For your own sake." The line went dead before she could respond. Eloise set her phone down on the counter with deliberate care, her appetite completely gone, replaced by a cold anger that settled in her chest. She walked to her living room window, pushing aside the curtain and staring out at the darkening street. A solitary streetlight cast yellow pools on the empty sidewalk. The director's warning should have frightened her into backing off. That was clearly the intent behind his carefully worded threat. Instead, she felt her resolve hardening like concrete. Something was very wrong here, and that puppy was just the tip of whatever ugly iceberg lurked beneath the surface. The more they tried to brush her off and intimidate her into silence, the more convinced she became that she needed to dig deeper, no matter the personal risk. She went to her desk, switched on the lamp, and pulled out a fresh notebook. With methodical precision, she began writing down everything she knew so far. The distinctive collar, the controlled sedative, the shelter's strange, evasive behavior, the director's threatening call. She drew lines between connected facts, creating a map of suspicion. Whatever was happening, she wasn't going to let it go. Not when innocent animals were being hurt, and not when powerful people thought they could simply make problems disappear with a phone call. The county library smelled of old paper and furniture polish, with undertones of dust and the faint scent of coffee from the librarian's desk in the corner. Eloise settled at a microfilm reader in the local history section, her notepad ready beside a chipped mug of cooling tea. Afternoon light filtered through high windows, casting long rectangles across the worn carpet as the machine's soft whir filled the quiet space. She adjusted her reading glasses and leaned forward, scrolling through decades of newspaper archives with methodical patience. The Whitmore crest appeared frequently throughout the years, charity galas with politicians smiling beside family patriarchs, hunting tournament sponsorships where proud men displayed their trophies, shelter donation ceremonies with oversized checks and professional photographers. She jotted down dates and details with her neat, precise handwriting, circling connections and drawing arrows between events, slowly piecing together a pattern that stretched back generations. The family had deep roots here, their hunting lodge a cornerstone of local society since the 1930s, when the first August Whitmore established himself as both businessman and benefactor. A yellowed society page photo made her breath catch. August Whitmore III, presenting an oversized check to the animal shelter, his smile not quite reaching his cold eyes. The same ornate crest adorned the backdrop banner, its intricate design unmistakable. Eloise leaned closer, finger tracing the elaborate swirls and symbols on the screen. The stylized tree, the crouching animal, the Latin motto beneath. It matched the puppy's collar perfectly, down to the last detail. Her stomach tightened with the confirmation. "Find what you're looking for?" asked the librarian, startling Eloise from her concentration. "Just some local history," she replied with a casual smile that concealed her racing thoughts. "Always interesting to see how things connect." Her next stop was the Whitmore Lodge's public office, housed in a renovated Victorian mansion on the edge of town, where manicured gardens transitioned into deeper woods. Wrought iron gates stood open during business hours, though cameras tracked every visitor. A brass plaque by the heavy oak door announced Whitmore Hunting Enterprises, Estorter 1934, in elegant lettering that somehow managed to appear both welcoming and forbidding. The reception area gleamed with polished mahogany and hunting trophies. Mounted heads of deer and exotic animals stared down with glass eyes that seemed to follow her movement across the imported rug. Silver-framed photographs displayed 3 generations of Whitmore men in hunting attire, rifles casually propped against shoulders. A sharp-featured woman with an expensive haircut looked up from behind an impressive desk, her expression professionally neutral, yet somehow immediately hostile. "Can I help you?" Her tone suggested she'd rather not, her manicured fingers pausing over her keyboard. Eloise pulled out a carefully prepared flyer, designed to look legitimate without revealing her true purpose. "Yes, I'm checking about lost pets in the area. There have been several missing recently near your property. Dogs and cats that wandered off and never returned. I'm trying to establish if there's a pattern." She kept her voice steady, conversational. "We don't handle lost pets," the receptionist cut in, her lips thinning with impatience. "This is private hunting land. Animals that stray onto the property are the responsibility of their owners." "I understand, but given your location bordering residential areas..." "Our seasonal hazel hunts are by invitation only," the woman interrupted with practiced efficiency. "If you're interested in membership, applications are reviewed annually by the board." She turned back to her computer, dismissal clear in the angle of her shoulders and the sudden clacking of keys. Eloise paused, the unfamiliar term catching her attention. "Hazel hunts?" "As I said, members only." The woman's fingers clacked louder on her keyboard, her gaze deliberately fixed on her screen. "The waiting list is currently 3 years long. Good day." Driving home through the golden afternoon light, Eloise turned the phrase over in her mind like a strange coin. Hazel hunts. Something about it nagged at her professional instincts, a term she'd never encountered in all her years working with animals. She pulled into her driveway, the familiar crunch of gravel doing nothing to settle her unease. Inside her modest kitchen, she spread her gathered evidence across the scarred wooden table where afternoon light spilled through gingham curtains. The comb, blood work showing the specialized sedative, ketamine mixed with something the lab couldn't quite identify, photos of the injured puppy with its strange pattern of wounds and the mysterious collar, copies of shelter transfer logs showing suspicious patterns of animals arriving and disappearing from record without explanation. Her own carefully detailed notes from the library research. The pieces were there, scattered like puzzle fragments, but she couldn't quite see how they fit together. The edges touched, but the picture remained frustratingly unclear. She tapped her pen against the table, brow furrowed in concentration. She needed someone who knew the hunting world from the inside, someone who understood the terrain she was trying to navigate. Marlon Ruiz. The name had surfaced several times in her research, a former game warden who'd made waves investigating illegal hunting activities 5 years ago. News articles described his dedication, and then his abrupt departure from service. He'd lost his position shortly after filing certain reports, but rumors suggested powerful interests had been involved in his dismissal. People still spoke of him with respect, though in hushed tones. She found his number through an old newspaper article about local conservation efforts, the paper slightly yellowed where she'd clipped and saved it. Her hands shook slightly as she dialed, uncertainty and determination warring within her chest as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Mr. Ruiz, my name is Eloise Carter," she said when the voicemail clicked on. "I'm investigating something involving the Whitmore Lodge and injured animals." She paused, aware of how strange her next words might sound. "I know this may sound odd, but I found a puppy with their crest, sedated and hurt in a way that suggests deliberate harm. The shelter seems to be covering something up. Records altered, questions deflected. I've gathered some evidence, blood work, transfer records, documentation of something called Hazel Hunts that I can't find reference to anywhere else." She took a deep breath. "I could use your expertise and perspective. If you're willing to talk, please call me back. I think this might be connected to what happened 5 years ago." She left her number and ended the call, staring at the scattered papers before her with a mixture of determination and dread. The morning sun streamed through her window, illuminating dust motes that danced above her gathered clues like tiny constellations. Whatever was happening at Whitmore Lodge, she had a feeling Marlon Ruiz might be one of the few people who could help her understand it, if he was willing to revisit old wounds. With methodical care, born of years of precise work, she organized her findings into a sturdy folder, each document protected in clear plastic. The puppy's collar photo on top, with its damning crest, followed by the blood work results with highlighted anomalies, shelter logs with their suspicious gaps, and her detailed notes from the library with dates and connections clearly marked. Whatever came next, she'd be ready, for the puppy's sake, and for all the other animals whose fates remained unknown. The phone rang at 2:30 in the afternoon. Eloise grabbed it on the first ring, her fingers curling tightly around the receiver as if it might escape. "Miss Carter?" The voice was gruff but measured, carrying the weight of someone who chose words carefully. "Marlon Ruiz returning your call." "Thank you for getting back to me so quickly." Eloise's heart raced as she gathered her thoughts, her free hand unconsciously straightening the stack of papers on the kitchen counter before her. The puppy stirred in his makeshift bed by the heating vent, letting out a soft whimper. "Your message mentioned Whitmore Lodge and injured animals." He paused, the silence laden with unspoken concerns. "Meet me at Della's Diner at 3. We shouldn't discuss this over the phone." The final words carried a distinctive edge of caution that sent a chill down Eloise's spine. Della's was a worn-down spot on the edge of town, far from the usual lunch crowds. The neon sign flickered intermittently, several letters permanently dark. Eloise arrived 15 minutes early, sliding into a booth with cracked vinyl seats that released small puffs of stuffing at the seams. The laminated menu was sticky against her fingers as she pretended to read it, her eyes darting to the door with each jingle of the bell. She recognized Marlon the moment he walked in. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-worn skin and a slight limp as he made his way to her table. His eyes scanned the nearly empty diner before settling on her. "Show me what you've got," he said, settling in across from her. His weathered face remained neutral as she laid out the photos and documents one by one, arranging them in the order that told the clearest story. The waitress approached, but something in Marlon's posture made her retreat without taking their order. He studied the collar first, running a calloused finger over the image, his nail tracing the unusual markings. "Definitely Whitmore's. Custom work. They mark all their hunting dogs this way. Nobody else in the county uses this pattern." He examined the bloodwork next, frowning deeply as he squinted at the chemical names. "This sedative, it's expensive, restricted, used for wildlife management. Regular vets don't keep this on hand." "The shelter seemed very interested in getting the puppy from me," Eloise added, keeping her voice low despite the nearest customer being 3 booths away. "Made a special point to call twice after I left." Marlon's eyes narrowed, crow's feet deepening at the corners. "They would be." His jaw tightened as he pushed the papers back toward her. "Listen, I lost my career trying to prove something was wrong out there. Followed every lead, documented every suspicious incident. Never could get concrete evidence. Or, rather," he added, a flash of bitterness crossing his face, "never could get anyone to care about the evidence I did find. But you'll help?" Eloise leaned forward, hands flat on the table, her gray-blue eyes holding his gaze steadily. He sighed, the sound of a man who knew better but couldn't walk away. "Meet me tomorrow at sunrise, corner of Ridgeline and County Road 8. We'll drive the public access roads, look for signs. But we stay off private property, I mean it." His index finger tapped the table for emphasis. "These people have friends in high places. Sheriff's Department, County Commission, State Wildlife Office, you name it." Back home, Eloise checked her voicemail, noticing the blinking light as she set her purse down. An unfamiliar number had left a message, the timestamp showing it had arrived while she was at Della's. "You're poking around in things you don't understand. For your own good, stop asking questions. Consider this your only warning. You have no idea what you're dealing with." The voice was digitally altered, impossible to identify, every syllable distorted into an unnatural mechanical drone. Eloise's hands trembled as she saved the message, her stomach knotting as the reality of what she'd stepped into began to sink in. She needed someone else to know what was happening. June Larkin had been covering local stories for 15 years on her radio show, never backing down from controversy or powerful interests. They'd become friends after June interviewed Eloise about senior care issues last year, bonding over shared concerns about the community's vulnerable populations. "A threatening voicemail?" June's voice crackled through the phone, sharp with concern. "Save it, and everything else you've collected. Put it all somewhere safe, not just at your house." "What do you think about the collar? The sedatives?" Eloise paced her small living room, peering occasionally through the blinds at the quiet street. "It's concerning," June admitted, and Eloise could hear the rapid tapping of a pen against a desk. "We could set up an anonymous tip line, see if anyone else has information. I've heard whispers about Whitmore Lodge before, but nothing concrete. But we'd have to be careful about accusations. Whitmore's lawyers are aggressive with defamation suits. They shut down the Courier's investigation last year with just a letter." "I understand." Eloise glanced at the puppy, curled up in his bed, his bandaged leg extended awkwardly. His ribs still showed through his coat, but he'd taken water eagerly today. "I just can't ignore this. Not when I've seen what they did to this little one." "Document everything," June advised, her voice softening. "And be careful. I mean it, Eloise. Don't take unnecessary risks. There's no story worth your safety." That night, sleep proved elusive, hovering just out of reach despite Eloise's exhaustion. The puppy whimpered every few hours, needing medication and comfort. Eloise sat with him on the living room floor, stroking his soft head while her mind raced with possibilities. What was happening at Whitmore Lodge? Who might be involved? How deep the corruption might go? The anonymous call played over and over in her thoughts, each repetition adding new layers of dread. Around midnight, car headlights swept across her bedroom wall, the beams moving slowly, deliberately. She froze, listening intently as the vehicle seemed to pause outside her house. Her breath caught in her throat as she counted seconds that stretched into eternity. Eventually, the vehicle moved on, the light fading. Still, sleep remained out of reach. She kept one hand on the puppy's warm body, taking comfort in his steady breathing while watching the hours tick by on the bedside clock, waiting for the first gray hints of dawn when she would meet Marlon and perhaps begin to uncover the truth. The morning mist clung to the ground as Eloise pulled up beside Marlon's weathered pickup truck. Dawn painted the sky in pale strips of pink and gray. Without a word, they began walking the public access road that bordered Whitmore's sprawling property. "Fresh tire tracks," Marlon whispered, pointing to deep treads in the muddy shoulder. "Heavy vehicle, probably a box truck. See how it cuts toward that service entrance?" Eloise nodded, snapping photos with her phone. They moved carefully along the fence line, staying on the public side. The morning dew soaked through her hiking boots. "Stop." Marlon held up his hand. 20 feet ahead, a red fox lay tangled in a cruel metal snare. This isn't legal hunting equipment. He photographed the scene from multiple angles, his jaw tight. "These are the same kinds of snares I found before they pushed me out." They documented everything: the placement of the snare, its proximity to the property line, the way it had been concealed. The fox's death hadn't been quick. Further along, they discovered a locked service gate half hidden by overgrown bushes. Unlike the main entrance with its polished brass nameplate, this gate was utilitarian, marked only by a numbered keypad. "Look," Eloise pointed to fresh tire tracks leading through the gate. "Same treads as before." "Courier truck." Marlon studied the ground. "They're using an unmarked vehicle. Probably removes any animals under cover of legitimate deliveries." By noon, they had circled back to their vehicles. Marlon spread their photos across his truck's hood. "This matches what I saw 5 years ago. The snares, the private access points, the unmarked vehicles. But I could never prove where the animals were going." He shook his head. "You've got more pieces than I ever did." Eloise drove straight to the radio station. June listened intently, examining each photo. "We need someone inside the shelter system," June said. "Someone who can verify the paper trail." "I might know someone," Eloise replied. She'd noticed how Tara Bloom, one of the shelter workers, had seemed troubled during their previous interactions. She found Tara restocking supplies at the shelter that evening. The younger woman glanced nervously over her shoulder before leading Eloise to a quiet storage room. "I've seen things that don't add up," Tara whispered. Her hands shook as she pulled documents from a folder. "These are copies of our transfer logs. Notice how many animals go to this one handler? No follow-up documentation, no final placement records." Eloise studied the papers. Dozens of animals, listed only as transferred to private rehabilitation with a handler's license number. "There's more." Tara's voice quivered. "Sometimes animals arrive already sedated. Nice ones, purebreds mostly. They're logged as strays, but..." She swallowed hard. "I'm scared of what's really happening." "These copies," Eloise said gently. "Would they help?" Tara nodded, pushing the folder toward her. Just, please be careful. Some of the board members, they have connections. They watch us. I'll protect your name, Eloise promised. She could see the fear in Tara's eyes, but also the relief of finally sharing her burden. Before leaving, Tara added one more detail. The transfers always happen on Wednesdays, early morning before the shelter opens. The team gathered around June's kitchen table, spreading out Tara's shelter logs. June's radio equipment hummed softly in the background, while Marlon traced potential routes on a county map. These transfer patterns, Marlon said, tapping the papers. They're too regular to be random. Every Wednesday, like clockwork. Eloise nodded, absently stroking Pip, who lay curled in her lap. The puppy's wounds were healing nicely, though he still favored his left leg. His trust in her had grown steadily over the past 2 days, and he now followed her everywhere, his bright eyes watching her every move. "We need more witnesses," June said, adjusting her headset. "I can put together a segment, nothing direct about Whitmore, just asking listeners if they've noticed anything unusual around the shelter or hunting grounds. Maybe someone's seen that courier truck." "Keep it vague," Marlon warned. "These people have friends in high places." Eloise watched as Pip dozed off, his tiny chest rising and falling. "He's the proof we need. The blood work showed that sedative, and his collar." "Speaking of which," June interrupted, "the lab results came back this morning. That leather sample from the collar, it's from a specialty craftsman in Tennessee. Custom work, usually for hunting dogs." They spent the next hour planning their approach. June would craft her radio piece carefully, focusing on animal welfare in general. Marlon would stake out the courier's likely routes, tracking their patterns. Eloise would continue caring for Pip, documenting his recovery and any identifying marks that could link him to Whitmore's operation. Just before midnight 2 days later, Eloise's phone lit up with Tara's number. "They're doing a transfer tonight," Tara whispered, her voice shaking. "I overheard the night supervisor. 1 a.m., 3 dogs going to that same handler." Eloise's heart raced as she called June and Marlon. Within 30 minutes, they met in the parking lot of a closed grocery store 2 blocks from the shelter. "I brought night vision gear," Marlon said, pulling equipment from his truck. "Left over from my warden days, and a good camera." June checked her digital voice recorder and spare batteries. "I've got the shelter's public layout memorized. Loading docks on the north side, partially hidden by those recycling bins." "We need to stay back," Eloise cautioned, checking her phone's camera settings. "If they spot us, this whole thing falls apart." They parked June's hybrid car, the quietest of their vehicles, on a side street with a clear view of the shelter's loading area. The night was moonless, perfect for surveillance. Marlon distributed the equipment, the night vision monocular, June's professional-grade zoom lens, Eloise's phone set to record video. They reviewed their exit strategy. If spotted, they'd split up and meet at June's station, taking different routes. "Remember," June whispered, checking her watch, "we're just gathering evidence. No confrontations." Pip had been left safely at Eloise's house, probably curled up in his new bed. Thinking of him gave Eloise strength. He was just one of countless animals caught in this operation. "Movement," Marlon hissed, pointing to a shadow near the loading dock. "Someone's opening the gate." They watched in tense silence as a white panel truck backed up to the dock. 2 figures emerged from the shelter's side door, leading what looked like 3 large dogs on leashes. June's camera clicked softly as she documented the scene. Eloise recorded video while Marlon used the night vision to note details: license plates, markings on the truck, identifying features of the people involved. The entire transfer took less than 10 minutes. The dogs were loaded, paperwork exchanged, and the truck pulled away with its lights off until it reached the main road. Got it all? June breathed, reviewing her photos. Clear shots of the truck, the handler, everything. This is just the beginning, Eloise said, her voice tight with determination. We need to follow this through. For Pip and all the others. They packed up quickly and quietly, each carrying a copy of the evidence they'd gathered. As they prepared to leave, Marlon pointed out tire tracks matching those they'd seen at Whitmore's property. Same truck, he confirmed. Now we just need to prove where it's going. At 11:30 p.m. sharp, Eloise and Marlon crouched behind a dumpster near the shelter's loading bay. The air was thick with tension, and occasional drops of rain made the asphalt gleam under the security lights. June, you copy? Eloise whispered into her phone. Clear as day, June's voice crackled through the speaker. Scanner's quiet, no police chatter. Marlon adjusted his position, wincing as his bad knee protested. White van coming up the access road, lights off. They watched as the vehicle approached, its engine barely audible. The van backed up to the loading dock with practiced precision. A shelter worker, someone Eloise recognized from her previous visits, emerged from the side door, pushing a dolly loaded with animal crates. Getting this? Eloise breathed, holding her phone steady to record. Every second, Marlon confirmed, his own camera clicking quietly. The shelter worker, whose name tag read Peterson, began efficiently loading the crates into the van. The sounds of whimpers and soft barks carried across the empty lot. Something in Eloise snapped. She couldn't just watch anymore. Cover me, she whispered to Marlon, and before he could stop her, she stepped out from behind the dumpster. Excuse me, she called out firmly, approaching the loading bay. I'm Eloise Carter, and I'd like to know where these animals are going. Peterson froze, then quickly slammed the van's rear doors. This is private property. Leave now. These are county animals, Eloise pressed, holding her phone up, obviously. The public has a right to know about after-hours transfers. I'm calling the police, Peterson snarled, reaching for the loading bay door control. Marlon emerged from the shadows, moving to stand beside Eloise. We just want answers. The loading bay door began to descend with a mechanical groan. Peterson's face was visible through the narrowing gap, twisted with barely contained rage. You want answers? Try asking your lawyer after we press charges. The door slammed shut with a metallic bang. Eloise started toward the van, but Marlon grabbed her arm. Wait. The screech of tires cut through the night. 2 black SUVs swept into the lot, boxing them in against the building. 4 men in dark clothing stepped out, their postures leaving no doubt about their intentions. Time to go, Marlon muttered, pulling Eloise backward. The plate, Eloise gasped, raising her phone one last time. Got it. KRX 4729. The men advanced steadily, saying nothing. One cracked his knuckles. Another reached inside his jacket. Marlon and Eloise turned and ran, their footsteps echoing off the building's walls. They cut through the gap between the dumpsters, scrambled over a low fence, and sprinted toward June's car. Go, go! Eloise gasped as they threw themselves into the back seat. June accelerated smoothly away from the curb, maintaining a steady speed to avoid attention. Anyone following? Marlon twisted to look out the back window. Don't think so. Those guys were pros. They were just sending a message. Eloise's hands shook as she checked her phone. The video saved. We got Peterson's face clear as day, the van, everything. They drove in tense silence to Eloise's house, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed. Once inside, they huddled around Eloise's kitchen table, watching the footage on her laptop, while Pip dozed in his bed nearby. Well, June said quietly, they definitely didn't want us seeing that transfer. Question is, what are we going to do about it? Eloise rubbed her temples, still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. We got what we came for. Now we need to figure out who those men were and where that van was headed." "Those weren't regular security guards," Marlin noted grimly. "Someone's spending serious money to keep this quiet." The morning sun filtered through June's studio windows as she leaned into her microphone, her voice measured and professional. "Good morning, Pine Valley. Today we're discussing a concerning pattern of late-night activity at our county animal shelter. If you've witnessed anything unusual between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. in recent months, we want to hear from you." She carefully avoided any mention of Whitmore Lodge, instead focusing on the community's right to transparency about shelter operations. As she spoke, Eloise sat in the corner of the studio, nervously twisting a paper cup in her hands. The response was immediate. By 10 a.m., 2 separate callers had left detailed messages about suspicious van activity at the shelter. One elderly woman who lived nearby described regular midnight deliveries, while a night shift gas station attendant recalled the same white van filling up during odd hours. "Both tips mention the same license plate," June said, comparing notes with Eloise in her office after the show. "KRX 4729 matches what you recorded." Marlin arrived with a thick manila envelope. "Called in some favors with DMV contacts," he said, spreading documents across June's desk. "Vans registered to Summit Transport LLC, shell company if I ever saw one." They spent the next hour tracing ownership records. Summit Transport led to another company, then another, until finally. "Here," Eloise pointed to a line of tiny text. "Property assets held by Whitmore Holdings Group." June whistled softly. "Direct link to the lodge, not even trying to hide it very hard." "They probably never expected anyone to look this close," Marlin said. Their satisfaction was short-lived. By noon, local news websites were running a press release from Whitmore Lodge's public relations office. "Recent allegations regarding our organization's involvement in shelter operations are malicious and unfounded. Whitmore Lodge maintains the highest ethical standards in all business dealings. We categorically deny any wrongdoing and will pursue legal action against those spreading defamatory claims." Eloise's phone buzzed. It was Tara. "I've got more," the shelter worker whispered. "Transfer records going back 6 months, and I found someone else, a vet tech who used to work for Whitmore's private clinic. She wants to talk." "Can you set up a meeting?" "Tonight. She's scared, but she'll talk." After hanging up, Eloise headed home to check on Pip. The puppy was improving daily, his wounds healing clean. She found an envelope in her mailbox, no return address. Inside was a single typed page. "Your slanderous accusations put you at risk. Consider your next moves carefully. Some stories are better left untold." Her hands trembled as she called Marlin. "Got one too," he said before she could speak. "These people don't mess around, Eloise." "We need to protect ourselves," she said. "Make everything official, document everything." "Agreed. I've got a friend at the state attorney's office. We do this right by the book. Build our case solid before they can bury it." Eloise looked at Pip, now sleeping peacefully in his bed. "Tara's bringing more documents, and a witness, former vet tech from Whitmore's clinic." "Good. The more paper trail we have, the harder it'll be for them to deny." Marlin paused. "You holding up okay?" "Scared," Eloise admitted, "but not stopping." "That's my girl. I'll pick you up for the meeting tonight. Safety in numbers." After hanging up, Eloise sat at her kitchen table, staring at the threatening letter. 6 months ago, she'd been nothing more than a caregiver, living a quiet life. Now she was at the center of something dark and dangerous. But looking at Pip's peaceful face, she knew she couldn't walk away. She carefully filed the threatening letter in a folder marked Evidence and began preparing for the evening's meeting. Whatever came next, they would face it together, armed with truth and determination. 2 days passed with agonizing slowness. Eloise sat in the sunlit corner of Meadowbrook Cafe, her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee. Every time the bell above the door chimed, she looked up expectantly. At precisely 2 p.m., a woman in green scrubs slipped into the chair across from her. She had dark circles under her eyes and kept glancing over her shoulder. "Sarah Mitchell," she whispered, extending a trembling hand. "I worked at Whitmore's private clinic for 8 months." Marlon, seated at a nearby table pretending to read a newspaper, shifted slightly to better observe their surroundings. "Thank you for coming," Eloise said softly. "I know this isn't easy." Sarah pulled a manila envelope from her bag. "I wrote everything down. Dates, times, quantities of sedatives ordered." She slid it across the table. "Dr. Harrison, Whitmore's private vet, he'd request unusual amounts of ketamine and other controlled substances, way more than needed for routine care." Eloise carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten affidavit, along with photocopied supply logs. "The dogs," Sarah continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'd bring them in at night sometimes, already sedated. Some had wounds, not hunting accidents, more like." She swallowed hard. "Like they'd been fighting." "Did you ever see where they kept them?" Sarah nodded. "There's a storage facility on the east side of the estate. Metal building. Looks like any other outbuilding, but it's got special ventilation, climate control. Dr. Harrison had the only key." She pulled out a rough sketch. "I drew the location. There's a service road that leads right to it." Eloise studied the drawing. "Did you ever see inside?" "Once. Cages, equipment, things that didn't belong in a normal vet clinic." Sarah's hands were shaking so badly she spilled some of her water. "I couldn't stay after that. Made up an excuse about family problems and quit." They talked for another 30 minutes, Sarah providing specific details about medication orders, unusual patterns in the clinic's operation, and the suspicious late-night activities she'd witnessed. Everything went into her sworn statement. After Sarah left, Marlon joined Eloise at her table. "Think it's enough?" Eloise spread out their collected evidence. June's witness statements, Tara's shelter transfer logs, the photographs of Pip's collar and injuries, the blood work showing controlled substances, and now Sarah's detailed affidavit. Combined with the shell company documentation? Eloise nodded. "It shows a pattern. The prosecutor has to take this seriously." They drove to Eloise's house, where they spent hours organizing everything into a coherent file. Marlon created a timeline, linking each piece of evidence to specific dates and events. Eloise wrote a detailed cover letter summarizing their findings. "We'll need copies," Marlon said. "Multiple sets, stored in different locations. People like Whitmore, they have ways of making evidence disappear." Eloise thought of the threatening letters, the midnight confrontation at the shelter. "Should we warn Sarah? Tara?" "Already handled it. June's got them both set up with lawyer friends, just in case." Marlon carefully labeled another folder. "We're doing this right by the book. No loose ends they can use against us." By evening, they had 3 complete sets of documentation. One would go to the prosecutor, one to June for safekeeping. The third, Marlon would secure with his contact at the state attorney's office. "First thing tomorrow morning," Eloise said, closing the final folder. 9 a.m. sharp at the county prosecutor's office. Marlon checked his watch. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." As she prepared for bed that night, Eloise checked on Pip. The puppy was healing well, his eyes bright and trusting. She scratched behind his ears, thinking of all the other dogs still trapped in Whitmore's operation. "Almost there," she whispered. "Just hold on." She laid out her clothes for morning, professional but practical, and set her alarm for 7 a.m. The evidence files sat ready on her kitchen table, representing months of work and risk from multiple brave people. Tomorrow they would finally bring everything into the light. The county courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its brick facade seeming to mock their hopes. Eloise clutched the evidence folder to her chest as she and Marlon climbed the worn stone steps. Assistant District Attorney Davies kept them waiting 40 minutes before ushering them into his office. His handshake was perfunctory. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you have concerns about Whitmore Hunting Lodge," he said, barely glancing at the carefully assembled documentation. "But you should understand, allegations like these require extraordinary proof." "We have proof," Eloise said, pulling out Sarah's affidavit. "A whistleblower from their private clinic, shelter transfer records showing—" "Hearsay," Davies cut in. "Circumstantial evidence at best. Mr. Whitmore employs some of the best attorneys in the state. They'd tear this apart." Marlon leaned forward. "Sir, we have documented evidence of illegal animal trafficking, misuse of controlled substances. Do you understand the political ramifications?" Davies shuffled papers on his desk. "Whitmore's family has been a pillar of this community for generations. Their charitable foundation funds half the county's youth programs." "So they're above the law?" Eloise demanded. Davies' expression hardened. "I'm trying to do you a favor. Weak cases damage legitimate investigations. Sometimes patience is the better part of valor." They left an hour later, the evidence folder unopened on Davies' desk. In the parking lot, Eloise's hands shook with anger. He didn't even look at it. He'd already decided. Marlon's jaw was tight. Money talks, and Whitmore's got plenty of it. By early afternoon, things got worse. June called, her voice tense. "Eloise, there's an article in the Herald. It's bad." The story appeared under the headline, "Animal Rights Vigilante Accused of Running Underground Network." It quoted anonymous sources claiming Eloise had stolen animals from legitimate owners and trafficked them across state lines. Her previous work history was twisted to suggest instability. Her phone buzzed with a message from her supervisor at the home care agency. Her license was under review due to concerning allegations. 3 of her regular clients canceled. "They're trying to destroy my reputation," she told Marlon over the phone. "Everything I've built." "It's their playbook," he replied. "Discredit the whistleblower, but we'll fight back." The call cut off abruptly. When she tried to call back, there was no answer. Hours passed with no word. Then her phone rang. A nurse at County General. Marlon had been brought in with injuries from a car accident. She found him in the ER, bandaged but alive. His truck had been run off the road outside town. When he tried to get out, someone shot at him. The vehicle burst into flames moments later. "Professionally done," he said grimly, touching the bandage where a bullet had grazed his temple. "Made it look random. No witnesses." Eloise sank into the chair beside his bed, the day's events crashing over her. They'd gone after her livelihood, her reputation. Now they were escalating to violence. "Marlon, I'm so sorry, I never meant—" "Don't," he cut her off. "This isn't your fault, it's theirs. And if they think this will stop us—" He caught her eye. "You're not giving up, are you?" Eloise thought of Pip, healing and trusting at home, of all the other animals still suffering, of Sarah and Tara risking everything to expose the truth. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not giving up." A nurse appeared to check Marlon's vitals. Outside the window, night had fallen. Somewhere in the darkness, Whitmore's operation continued. But tomorrow would be another day, another chance to fight back. "They showed their hand," Marlon said quietly. "Got sloppy. Desperate people make mistakes." Eloise nodded, exhausted but resolute. The threats were real now, the danger personal. But she wouldn't back down. Not when they were so close to exposing the truth. A week passed like molasses while Marlon recovered in the hospital. Eloise split her time between visiting him, caring for Pip, and working with June to build their case. The attack had shaken them, but it also proved they were getting close to the truth. "We need to be smarter about this," June said over coffee in her radio station office. "Hit them where they can't retaliate, with irrefutable public evidence." Eloise nodded, running her finger around the rim of her mug. "Tara mentioned there's CCTV footage at the shelter. If we could get that. And I can use Sarah's affidavit, carefully edited to protect her identity. Combined with those transfer logs." June's eyes lit up with professional excitement. They divided their tasks. June would craft a series of broadcasts, each building on the last, using their evidence strategically. Her station's lawyers would review every word to ensure it was legally sound. 3 days, June decided. Give me 3 days to build the story right. While June worked on the broadcast angle, Eloise coordinated with Tara. The shelter worker was terrified but determined. They met in the parking lot of a busy supermarket, where Tara passed over a USB drive with trembling hands. "I could only copy part of it," she whispered. "The system automatically deletes footage after 2 weeks, but I saved what I could." That night, Eloise reviewed the grainy security footage on her laptop. Most of it showed routine shelter operations. But then, there it was. The same unmarked van they'd photographed, backing up to the loading dock at 2:15 in the morning. Men loading crates. The timestamp clearly visible. She followed the van's path through different camera angles until it disappeared onto the main road. But Tara had managed to save more. Footage from another night showing the same van entering the service entrance at Whitmore Lodge. Over the next 3 days, June's broadcasts carefully laid out their case. First, she covered the broader issue of animal trafficking in the region. Then she introduced documentation about suspicious shelter transfers. Finally, she discussed the evidence of veterinary drug misuse, all while never directly naming Whitmore. The community began to talk. Comments flooded the station's website. Other witnesses came forward with stories about strange nighttime activities at the lodge. "We need to take this public in a way they can't ignore or bury," June said on the 3rd day. She was reviewing the CCTV footage for the 10th time. A town hall broadcast, live, with call-ins and evidence presentation. Eloise thought about it. A public forum would make it harder for Whitmore to retaliate. The truth would be out there, impossible to erase. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow night. Prime time?" June's face was set with determination. "We'll have security, lawyers present, everything documented. They won't be able to stop it without exposing themselves." Eloise spent that evening preparing their evidence for public presentation. The CCTV footage, Sarah's affidavit, Tara's transfer logs, everything meticulously organized. Each piece told part of the story. Together they painted a damning picture that not even Whitmore's money could easily dismiss. She visited Marlon in the hospital to tell him their plans. He was looking stronger, though still confined to bed rest. "Be careful," he warned. "They're cornered now. That makes them dangerous." "We will be," she promised, "but we have to finish this." The next day dawned clear and cold. Eloise and June met early to prepare for the evening broadcast. They ran through their presentation, checked their documentation one final time, and coordinated with the station's security team. The pieces were in place. After weeks of investigation, threats, and violence, they were ready to expose Whitmore's operation to the entire community. The truth would finally come to light. The morning of the broadcast, Eloise's phone buzzed. June's name flashed on the screen. "They're trying to shut us down," June said, her voice tight. "Whitmore's lawyers just filed for an emergency injunction." Eloise's stomach clenched. "Can they do that?" "They're claiming defamation and potential business harm. But our station's legal team is fighting it. The judge won't review it until 4 o'clock. That gives us just enough time. They met at the station 2 hours before the scheduled broadcast. Security guards patrolled the perimeter, while technicians set up the live feed. Eloise arranged their evidence on the desk, folders containing Sarah's affidavit, the CCTV footage queued up on a laptop, Tara's transfer logs, and Pip's medical records. At 7 p.m. sharp, June's voice went live across the airwaves. "Good evening. Tonight we're bringing you documented evidence of illegal animal trafficking in our community." Eloise sat beside her, heart pounding as June methodically presented their case. They showed the CCTV footage of late-night transfers, the suspicious pattern of shelter records, and Sarah's carefully redacted testimony about the sedatives. "And here," Eloise said, holding up Pip's blood work results, "is proof that these same controlled substances were found in an injured puppy wearing Whitmore Lodge's distinctive collar." The phone lines lit up immediately. Callers shared their own observations of strange activities at the lodge. A former groundskeeper described suspicious nighttime deliveries. A neighbor reported hearing dogs crying late at night. Halfway through the broadcast, their producer signaled frantically, "Whitmore's watching. His office is blowing up our switchboard with threats." But it was too late to stop the truth. The evidence was out there, spreading across social media, being recorded and shared. Public outrage swelled with each new revelation. They were just wrapping up when Eloise's phone vibrated. A text from Tara. "They just suspended me. Security escorted me out." Before Eloise could process this, another message came through, from Marlon's nurse. The sheriff's department had arrived at the hospital with a warrant for his arrest. The charge, criminal trespassing on Whitmore property, with supposedly clear evidence of break-ins. "They're saying you forged those documents," June whispered, showing Eloise her tablet. A breaking news alert claimed that expert analysis had revealed the shelter transfer logs were fabricated. The backlash hit like a tidal wave. Social media exploded with accusations. Local news outlets picked up the forgery allegations. People who had supported them hours earlier now questioned everything. Eloise watched helplessly as their carefully built case began to crumble under Whitmore's counterattack. Their evidence was being discredited piece by piece. Marlon was being framed. Tara had lost her job, and her own reputation was being systematically destroyed. "Don't let them shake you," June said firmly, gripping Eloise's arm. "This is what they do when they're desperate. We knew they'd fight back." But the intensity of the response was overwhelming. By nightfall, Eloise's phone was flooded with hostile messages. Her social media accounts were bombarded with accusations. Local news vans parked outside her house, hoping to catch the document forger on camera. She sat in her darkened living room, Pip curled in her lap, watching her world unravel. The puppy whimpered softly, sensing her distress. Everything they'd worked for was being buried under an avalanche of lies and political pressure. But the evidence was real. The truth was real. Pip was real, his scars and trauma impossible to fake. Somewhere in this storm of accusations and counter-accusations, that truth had to matter. Eloise scratched behind Pip's ears, feeling his steady heartbeat against her hand. They might have underestimated Whitmore's reach and ruthlessness, but they hadn't been wrong. The question was, how could they prove it when every piece of evidence was being systematically discredited? 2 nights after the disastrous broadcast, Eloise's doorbell rang at 11:30 p.m. No one was there, but a thick manila envelope lay on her welcome mat. Her hands shook as she opened it inside. The contents made her blood run cold. Internal memos, schedules, and a hastily scrawled note warning that Whitmore had ordered a complete cleanup during the upcoming harvest hunt weekend. The documents detailed plans to move animals off-site and destroy records while the hunt provided cover. She called June immediately. "We need to meet, now." Within an hour, they huddled in June's studio office with Marlon, who had been released on bail. His arm was still bandaged, but his eyes were sharp. "They're going to eliminate everything," Eloise said, spreading out the documents. "Look at these transport schedules. They're moving animals out during the hunt celebration." Marlon studied the papers. "The harvest hunt is perfect cover. Half the county's elite will be there, drinking champagne and shooting clay pigeons while their dirty work happens behind the scenes." "We need to stop them," June said. "But how? They've discredited all our evidence." Eloise's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Sarah gave me your contact. I work maintenance at the lodge. Can help. Meet tomorrow?" The lodge worker, who introduced himself as Miguel the next day, provided them with detailed information about the property's underground service tunnels. They use these passages to move supplies and other things without being seen, he explained, showing them photos of the tunnel layouts on his phone. Over the next few days, they planned carefully. June would set up remote broadcasting equipment that could transmit live footage directly to her station's emergency feed. Marlon, despite his injury, knew the terrain and could guide them through the tunnel system. Eloise would document everything with a hidden camera. "The harvest hunt starts at sunset Saturday," Miguel told them. "Security will be focused on the main events. The tunnels will be mostly clear after midnight when they do the major moves." They gathered their equipment: night vision cameras, digital recorders, live streaming devices, and burner phones. June arranged for her most trusted producer to be ready at the station. "Once we're inside," Marlon explained, marking points on Miguel's tunnel map, "we'll have about 2 hours before the late-night transport arrives. That's our window to document the holding areas and get into position." Eloise studied the complex network of passages. "And you're sure about this access point?" she asked Miguel. He nodded. "The service door by the old generator room. I'll make sure it's unlocked. But after that, you're on your own." The night of the hunt arrived clear and cold. From their hidden position in the woods, they watched the parade of luxury cars arriving at the lodge. Laughter and music drifted down from the main house, while they waited in tense silence. At midnight they moved. Miguel's key code worked. The service door opened with a soft click. They slipped inside, switching on their night vision equipment. The tunnel air was damp and cool. "Remember," June whispered, adjusting her transmitter, "everything. Broadcast straight to the station. Whatever we find, the public will see it in real time." Marlon took point, his injured arm held close to his chest as he guided them through the darkness. Eloise activated her hidden camera, her heart pounding with each step deeper into Whitmore's secret world. Above them, the harvest hunt celebration continued, music and voices muffled by layers of earth and concrete. Down here, in the shadows, they moved silently toward the truth they'd fought so hard to expose. The tunnels branched and twisted. Marlon checked the map at each intersection, leading them steadily toward the hidden holding areas. June tested her signal strength periodically, whispering confirmations into her mic. They were running out of time. Soon, the transport vehicles would arrive, and their chance would be gone. But they were close now. So close to finally uncovering what Whitmore had worked so hard to hide. The tunnels narrowed as they pressed deeper into the compound. Their footsteps echoed softly against damp concrete walls. At 11:45 p.m., Miguel held up his hand at a heavy steel door. "The holding area," he whispered. Inside, the stench hit them first: urine, fear, and antiseptic. Their lights revealed rows of stacked crates. Whimpers and weak barks echoed in the chamber. June's camera light swept across sedated dogs, some with fresh wounds, others barely moving. "Get this on camera," Eloise breathed, her voice shaking. All of it. Tara, who had slipped away from her suspension to join them, choked back a sob as she recognized shelter tags on several dogs. These were marked as transferred to rescue, she said, checking numbers against her phone. Marlon discovered a desk with ledger books. Here, dates, amounts, buyer information. Everything's documented. A sudden slam echoed through the tunnels. Miguel went rigid. Someone's coming. Heavy boots thundered above them. A voice crackled over a radio. Intruders in the lower level. Seal all exits. Move, Marlon urged, pushing them toward the emergency ladder he'd noted on the map. They ran through the twisting passages as lights began flickering on behind them. June's phone streamed everything. Their flight, the evidence, the pursuing footsteps. Hundreds were already watching. They reached the grated exit leading to the courtyard. Marlon strained to lift the rusted metal. As Eloise helped him push, a shot rang out. Marlon grunted, blood spreading across his sleeve. Go, he shouted, bracing the grate with his good arm. Eloise and June scrambled up into the rain-soaked courtyard. Tara helped Miguel pull Marlon through after them. June's phone captured everything. The wounded dogs being rescued, Marlon's bleeding arm, the armed men emerging from the tunnels. Sirens wailed in the distance. The live stream had done its work. Help was coming. But Whitmore's security team moved in, faces hard in the courtyard's harsh lights. Drop the phones, one ordered, raising his weapon. Instead, Eloise stepped forward, June's phone held high. There are thousands watching right now, she called out. Everything's been recorded. More sirens joined the first. Headlights swept the grounds as police cars and news vans breached the gates, responding to viewers' flood of emergency calls. Through the chaos, Eloise spotted Whitmore himself sprinting toward a waiting car. Without hesitation, she ran after him, rain pelting her face. She caught him at the car door, spinning him around. You can't run from this, she said, gripping his expensive jacket. Everyone knows now. Everyone sees. Behind her, officers swarmed the courtyard, subduing Whitmore's men. June's live stream captured it all. The rescued dogs, the evidence, and Whitmore himself, his carefully crafted facade crumbling in the rain. The morning sun broke over the Whitmore estate, now swarming with federal agents in dark windbreakers. Evidence markers dotted the courtyard where last night's confrontation had played out. Inside the main building, investigators methodically documented everything while animal rescue teams carefully removed the surviving dogs. Eloise sat on the hood of her car, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, watching Whitmore being led out in handcuffs. His perfectly pressed hunting clothes were wrinkled, his usual arrogant expression replaced by barely contained rage. Federal agents flanked him as news cameras captured his perp walk. Ms. Carter? A female agent approached, notepad in hand. I'm Agent Rivera with the Federal Animal Trafficking Task Force. Your documentation and June's broadcast gave us everything we needed to move on this. We've already arrested 3 county officials who were on Whitmore's payroll. At the local hospital, Eloise visited Marlon. His arm was bandaged, but he managed a tired smile. Doctor says I'll be back tracking in no time, he said. Worth it to see Whitmore taken down? The shelter underwent immediate changes. Tara was reinstated with a formal apology, and the board appointed her as interim director. She called Eloise that afternoon. We're already implementing new protocols, she said, voice bright with purpose. Every transfer will be documented with multiple signatures and follow-ups. A week later, Eloise faced the licensing board about her caregiver credentials. The room was packed with supporters, June, Marlon in a sling, even some of her elderly clients. The evidence spoke for itself. She had acted to protect vulnerable animals and expose criminal activity. The board not only cleared her, but commended her actions. The most unexpected healing came through a phone call. Her sister Rachel, who hadn't spoken to her in years, reached out after seeing June's broadcasts. "I saw what you did," Rachel said, voice thick with emotion. "And Eloise, one of those dogs they rescued? It's Max. Our Max who disappeared 3 years ago. The vet confirmed his microchip." They met at the shelter where Max was recovering. Rachel broke down at the sight of her aged but alive golden retriever. As the sisters hugged, years of distance melted away. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you," Rachel whispered, "when you said something was wrong at that shelter back then." "We know the truth now," Eloise replied. "That's what matters." In the days that followed, June approached Eloise with an idea. "What if we combined resources?" she suggested. "Your care experience, my networking. We could start a legitimate rescue, do things right." They found a small property just outside town. The Second Chance Sanctuary sign went up on a Friday morning. Eloise sat on the porch, Pip curled contentedly in her lap, while June worked on their website nearby. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fresh beginnings. "Look at him," June said, nodding at Pip. "Hard to believe he's the same scared pup you found in that ditch." Eloise scratched behind Pip's ears, remembering that rainy night that had started everything. He was healthy now, his coat glossy, his eyes bright with trust. Like so many others, he had found his way home. The indictments continued to come down. Shelter officials, corrupt inspectors, Whitmore's entire operation exposed. But here, on this porch, with June's steady presence beside her and Pip's warm weight in her lap, Eloise finally felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Justice had been served, broken bonds mended, and her determination vindicated. This was where she belonged. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.